Welcome, everybody, to the Wall Street Coach podcast. This is Kim Ann Curtin with the one and only Gregg Sciabica. And he and I have been waxing on without the recording on because we have so much to discuss. And at this point, we're just putting the recording on. What do I want to say about Gregg? I want to say that he is a battled, hardened trader who has survived 25 years in the trenches. He's recognized for his research, his technical analysis, and his highly successful career as a short seller. Gregg, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you, Kim. We've been having some great conversations, and it finally occurred to you to hit record. So now it's like, wow. Where do we start?
Deep thought. We're in the middle of deep thought, and I thought we got to capture this on a recording. So please continue.
Of course. How do we? Where to even start to kind of? I mean, we were all over the place. We're just having good conversation for too long, and we finally started talking about trading, and that's when it's like time to hit record. I was getting a thought, and without the context, hopefully it still makes perfect sense. But I'm gonna try. So here we are having a conversation. You invited me on because I'm a trader. You want to provide, content for the trading world for other traders to learn, to just to share info, maybe have a little entertainment along the way. But traders are obviously very thirsty for knowledge, and it's a very challenging industry, and it's very challenging, especially too, because you can't just go get trained on how to be a trainer and show up and then start making money. We're all on this challenging journey of trying to figure out how to become a trader. And I think where my thoughts were when we hit record was it's interesting how when I'm in this seat having this kind of conversation, there's this strong, it's an assumption on some level on both sides of the camera where, you're talking to a trader, so therefore I'm a trader. And what happens is, we're using a label, a trader, and we start building an entire conversation around a label, and we start talking about, conversations, which we were having in this case. We're talking about the analogy of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and sorry if I'm spoiling it, that you have this wonderful trading hero's journey that you made that's kind of, built on the model of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And that's where my thoughts were going. I mean, they were going many different places. There's some really interesting, unique perspectives that I think you're bringing to this concept that, I find thought-provoking. And that's where my mind started going of like, there's just the idea of being a trader. It made me pause and think like, okay, that's a label. And I never really even think about it, but it's like you're given the label and therefore you start playing the part, of course. And all this talk, about, traders trying to become a quote successful trader, but what is it really? If you want to become a runner, you put your shoes on, you walk out the door, you run. If you want to become a trader, obviously you could boot up the computer, open your account, and trade. So what's the difference? Well, the biggest difference is you can be a trader and lose money. Maybe in that case, you can be a quote trader, but you're not really doing what you set out to do. And that's where that's kind of where I was leading to. Like the thought of, I was just reflecting how, when I started this, became a career, I didn't start with that label. There was never a moment of, I mean, I don't want to say there wasn't like a thought in the back,
Right.
of a hope or a vision, but it wasn't, the goal wasn't, I want to quote be a trader. It was, I want to make some money in the market. I want to make some money, really,
Wow.
right? That's not,
That's a
there's no label there.
huge paradigm shift. It's what I'm hearing you say is that is it possible that label is perhaps not only limiting those who want to make money in the market, but putting them into an archetype, so to speak, that they start to just trade because of the label, even when it's not appropriate to trade.
Exactly. I
That
mean,
is
yes, that's
deep.
probably at the top of the list, but we can keep going from there. And that might
Totally.
be the biggest and the first one at the top. That's
Totally.
huge. And yeah, it's like, what is your goal? In my case, I'm just thinking back, the goal is to make money, give me that label or don't give it to me. That's irrelevant. I'm trying to make some money. And I mean, again, maybe there is a thought somewhere
Sure.
in the recesses that, it'd be nice to be a trader, but that wasn't the goal. And when traders are, obviously it's a very challenging profession. Even when you do it for years, even when you are considered successful by yourself or by others, every day is still a new challenge. Like at least for me, there's never that day where I'm like, oh, this is easy. That never happens. Never happened for me, at least. I mean, there are days where I'm like, that's an awesome trade, and like, I know it, and it might seem like that trade was easy, but it doesn't mean, you know, the act of trading and starting again the next day is easy. Every day is like, you got to be disciplined and work hard, and you have to be very careful because it's easy to screw up and piss away profits very quickly. But if the goal is just to make money, then I don't know if that maybe changes a lot of it. Then instead of all this focus on, all these, trading psychology related concepts that we spend a lot of time ruminating on, all you're trying to do is find some little thing somewhere where you can make a sense. Don't even call it a trade for a moment. Make a bet.
That's
Make
right.
a good bet.
That's right.
Like, I know a good bet when I see one. It doesn't
Totally.
have to be in the markets and in trading.
That's
You
right.
know, I mean, usually it's friendly bets for $1, but I
That's
can
right.
make bets with friends and I know when it's a good one.
Totally.
And when it's not a
Totally.
good one, I also know that and I won't make the bet.
It's a profound, it's a profound concept because the labels all over our lives limit us to such a smaller way. And, what I'm thinking of is this, I got to interview Matthew McConaughey and his book in Green Lights. He talked about how he after he'd win an Academy Award, he would take himself out of the places that recognized him, go like to the Amazon where nobody knew him. And he talked about taking off his clatter ring, which represented his Irish heritage. He'd take off his wedding ring. He'd take off his baseball hat. He took off the things that had labels that were, he said, not because he was saying any of those labels were wrong, but he wanted to step into how he is more than those labels and living without the labels for a short period of time, let's say a week, 5 days, whatever. Then he would put them back on, but he had come into embracing the fullness of how he's so much more than those labels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what, like, I this is so profound that this what you're speaking to, imagine as a trader not calling yourself that. Like now, especially, Greg, you tell me if you see this, but there's like a cachet to being a trader today. It's a sexy label. You look like you're cool. You got the, like it's deep.
It also conveys like a lifestyle, which of course
Yes.
is silly because that's misleading. And yeah, there's so much about it. But whether you want to be a trader or like let's just say you want to be a professional sports bettor, you want to make a living placing bets on sports games and stuff. And there are people that do that.
Yep.
But you don't have to have this huge paradigm shift of a label. You can start with just, hey, if you find one where somehow you figured out a way to spot a situation where the odds are skewed and it, you can make money on that one game. You don't need to be a professional sports bettor to make money doing it. And perhaps in the beginning, you only do it once in a great while because that's like the only scenario that you have identified so far that works. But you can keep at it and slowly add to that repertoire.
Sure.
Yeah. And eventually maybe, you're like, wow, I'm doing this enough and often enough and I'm making enough money that I guess I'm a gambler now, a professional. But who cares? Like,
Totally.
the goal is not to become that professional thing. The goal is just to make money.
That's right. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right.
So, couple of questions, especially on this topic of maybe labels limit some traders. What are some of the limits? Because you've been at this for 2.5 decades plus. What were the early limits, if any, that you bumped into that you yourself had to kind of transcend? Were they things that you can still remember?
So limits, um,
Emotional and or yeah,
I guess that question, I sense, I don't know. I'm wondering if you're implying something a little bit further than just that, like limit of what? To making money, to being a trader, to
to being consistent and to perhaps even being profitable. Did you find there were any kind of emotional hurdles or beliefs about yourself or the market or money that you yourself had to sort of transcend or transmute to get past?
Well, I think some of those issues might have actually cropped up later. So let me give you a quick little story. I may have shared this once or twice in the past, but I don't think I really share it often. So hopefully this is new to everybody. Before I even started trading, I had this experience with a boss I had. It was a small business, so we used to have a little banter, and occasionally, more than occasionally, we often butted heads in a friendly way. It really was,
Mhm.
but I would disagree, and I was respectful because he was my boss, but but nonetheless, I was comfortable enough to be like, I think you're wrong, I think it's,
Mhm.
I think we, it's this or that, but it was friendly, and we would do the playful bet, of course, when you have a disagreement, and always be for a dollar, but
Yeah.
in my memory, because I kind of kept track, if I recall, I think I won 19 out of 21 bets. And then he's finally like, we then had one of these, right? Where, and this isn't because I'm always right. It's not the point of the story. In
Right.
fact,
No.
I told you the point is we got to another one of these moments of disagreement, and he goes, all right, let's bet. I'm like, no. He's like, what? Why won't you bet? I'm like, because I'm not sure about this one. I only bet when I know I'm right. The point isn't that I was always right and he was always wrong. The point is I only took the bet when I was sure, and all the other ones, like,
Yeah.
I would obviously, I wouldn't offer to bet to begin with. A lot of the times when I knew it was right, I'd be the one initiating, and he was always
Sure.
excited
Yeah.
to take it. And then when there was an instance where he was confident and he's like, all right, let's do our usual bet. This is our thing. And then I'm like, no. And he's like, how could I say no? Like, this is what we always do. We always bet when we disagree. I'm like, no, I just don't do it when I don't know I'm right. But that was just like the mentality I had.
Mm,
And this wasn't like a conscious processing when I'm, taking it to trading. It's not like this is what I was always thinking, but it was already embedded in me, which is I didn't like, I'm not a bettor. I'm not a gambler. Like I'm not going to,
yeah.
or to take it one other direction would say, like occasionally people like to say, like when someone who's not very familiar with trading, like, oh, isn't that just gambling? It's like, yeah, but there's a big difference between, going to the casino and being the casino. The casino knows when the odds are in their favor, they're going to make money over time. I mean, they know for a fact, Statistically, of course, there's a chance they'll be wrong, but it's like one in trillions upon trillions, right? It's so infinitely remote. Of course, they're just going to make money. As long as the customers come, they're making money on the gambling side.
Yeah.
So when someone says, oh, isn't trading just gambling? It's not as negative as it sounds. Like, that's actually, if you do it right, a good thing. Yeah, gambling can be good if the odds are in your favor. If you're going to the casino as the client or the customer, in that case, either, you're trying to make money foolishly because you don't understand how it works, or you're going for the thrill, which is fine,
Mhm.
if it's fine if you do it occasionally for fun and you know that, and that's your budget, not if you're doing it over and over. Okay. Likewise with trading, if you're the casino, you have something that puts the odds in your favor.
Yeah.
It's kind of gambling, but it's like being the casino. Now that's my mentality when it comes to like, to betting, and that it always has been. I have no interest in going to the casino because when the odds are not in my favor, I know it, and it just feels horrible. I'm like, yeah, I don't get any excitement out of that. And then, my comment to others, like, oh, can't you just have fun? Don't you want to just spend a few bucks? I would love to be able to be the casino. Like, I want to host the games. Wouldn't it be great if it was legal for me to have a blackjack table in my living room? Everyone, come on over. Like, I would love it, but I hate playing it as a customer. Because, like, why would I want to? Like, even if I put in all the effort in the world. Now, granted, you could count cards. I mean, like, for most games, you could put in all the effort in the world and still you have losing odds. Like, you're telling me I have to put in all that effort and at best I can just lose less money? It's horrible. So when I first started trading, like this, I didn't have the label being a trader. I developed this system, where, I granted, I was not experienced. So it was kind of rudimentary, but, I developed this system that I did some basic back testing on, came up with an idea where it appeared as if, this would work. Like the odds were in my favor. That's how I perceived it. I didn't perceive it with emotion or any of that perception of other than just if it looks like it will work, then that's what I should do and do it.
Yeah.
Just like the bets with my boss, right? Like, granted, totally. I wasn't right 100% of the time, but it was a very high percent of the time. It had nothing to do with me being smarter than him. Honestly, nothing to do with it. It just had to do with he was, and not to put him down, but he actually was the type that liked to go to Atlantic City. So he liked the bet to him was fun. It was the game, right? And of course, for $1, I could have played along. Maybe I actually was a little bit of a dick to not take the last, I should have been nice just to do it in reverse.
But it was the principle. It was the principle of not engaging in that behavior, regardless of the dollar amount. It was the principle. And
it was there was no sense of wanting to pursue the thrill of it. It was more of, if you're going to give me $1 for being right, I'll take it.
Totally. Totally. But principles. So let's talk about that, because I don't know if that is spoken about often. in trading. And yet there is something to be said about the principle of being confident in what, I think some of just our conversations over this time we've known each other, which is a couple of years now, 3 years, I don't even know. It's been a while. 3 years, 4 years.
Oh, we go back 2 or 3 decades, Kim.
We do. But the principles, like you don't hear a lot of traders talk about the principles with their choice. Like that, I get that from you all the time in all our kind of, philosophical conversations. You have a set of principles that inform how you live. So of course that would inform how you work. And I feel like that is what you're sort of pointing to in this concept of the letting go of the label, perhaps, and even on principle, not taking a bet, even when it's only $1 loss, because you're not certain. So talk about, especially for traders, perhaps, who are still in that beginner stage, even if we say a couple of years or less than 5, how did they get that certainty? And how do you measure what that certainty needs to look like?
That's a good question. That's a hard one. I mean, hard, not as in I can't come up with ideas to answer, as in it's there are a lot of different answers for each person, what I mean, because we're all going to have different approaches, but I'll answer, obviously from my perspective, but I'm just adding a little bit there to say, what works for you what works for any is going to be different. It's not like the answer of, here's the secret sauce and this is what everyone needs to do.
No.
And I want to quickly point out, because I'm going to forget, as we're talking, I'm processing, and I have more to add to your first question. I don't want to lose that thought.
You can.
I'm like,
you can.
oh, okay.
Go ahead.
But I don't want to lose. Okay.
Yeah.
So
this is Joe Rogan. This is Joe Rogan episode. We might go 5 hours today. So go do it. Do what you will.
Right. All right. I just hate when people are in a conversation and someone goes off on a tangent and then they never answered the good question. Right. Like as a listener, I'm like, but I wanted to know that. Yeah. Okay. So to your first question, because you were asking about, I can't paraphrase, but I know what you're asking. Limitations. That was it.
Yes.
So, when I very first started, the limitations, I guess, I'm trying to think back, like, maybe they weren't, I mean, of course there's always gonna be something, but it wasn't like, these big issues, because that's, I was just making a trade. There weren't all these extra thoughts layered on. I just did it,
Yeah.
But as we're talking, then, my memory is slowly replaying, and I'm like, you know what? After I was doing it for good, almost 6 months, like pretty close to exactly half a year, that I was in, so, making money. I was doing well right from the start. I was lucky in that sense. We can come back to that which ties into your second question.
Yep.
I need to take notes for myself because I'll forget all this. Okay. Here's something that did come up, and this thing rears its ugly head over and over. Ego.
Mm.
And I got to a point, because I was doing well. I mean, I knew there was beginner's luck. I wasn't that foolish, but nonetheless, it does slowly get to you, even when you brush it aside. It finds its way into your head. And what happened for me, and this is the part still repeats, you're doing well for a while, and then, the market, the way markets present opportunities kind of go in cycles. There are different types of environments and different types of setups that work well, and and things kind of go, you hit a lull here and there, so here I was, really fortunate that I had pretty solid, consistent profit and growth and was doing well. But then I hit one of these periods where the market was, kind of shifted a little, not dramatic, but enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I didn't detect the ego part. Maybe I knew it, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I let my guard down, right? And I'm like, let me try this, because I'm thinking like, well, I'm getting really good at trading at this point. This should work too. Which is, of course, it's stupid, right? Because in the beginning, I was just making good bets. When I had the odds in my favor. Now it shifts to a little bit of an ego where, oh, I think this should work. That's definitely different than testing something and coming up with an idea that's that has structure and rules and a whole process behind it. Now it's more of like, I'm not finding anything, but man, I think I could do this. All right, sure. Place a trade. And when it starts going wrong, rather than immediately, being like, well, that was dumb, double down, triple down, and just, not only get stubborn, but continue with the ego, thinking like, okay, well, maybe I was a little early, but this time, but I'm gonna, this is getting, this opportunity is going from good to better to great to amazing to holy shit, I'm in trouble. And that hits you, blindsided, because I had not experienced that before, and not being aware of it. I mean, I wasn't that ignorant to not know once it happened, but yet the way it just kind of appeared, it just kind of happened, you don't reflect on those things in the moment, but as soon as it's over, you're like, whoa, how did I, F that up so bad? What the hell was I thinking? What was I doing? And, if you're not caught up in the whole, this whole idea of, I'm trying to be a trader, I'm just trying to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden I'm kind of moving into that territory of like, I'm a trader, meaning like I can just look at something and judge it to be a good trade, like without all the other stuff attached to it. And now all of a sudden it's just like, I'm I'm dealing with this whole new I don't even know how to say it. Like this whole new problem of like I mean, like there are all these internal conflicts and just questions, and like, I mean, how do you process it? It's just like, it's like, it was supposed to be easy because all I'm doing is this thing. But now it's like you suddenly realize, like, well, there's this whole other challenge of, if you're putting yourself out there and putting real money to work, you can easily just go off course, jump over the guardrail and do something totally reckless, super easy, super fast, blow all your money. I didn't blow it all, but I was more than half, which to me was, I mean, I was on, I was, my biggest losses to that point were, I can't remember now, but they were relatively small, right? So to take a huge loss at that point, it's a wake up call on a scale is just so monumental relative to, the whole situation. It just shook me to the core of like, what the hell, like, if you put yourself in that position, then, it makes you question yourself. Like, can I trust myself
Totally.
If you do that once, can you do it again? Like,
Yeah.
So it's a limitation in a sense, but I get in some ways it might just be more of like a vulnerability,
Hmm.
like a risk vulnerability of sorts.
Yep.
Um, you could be a super careful driver to be as
Mm.
safe as possible, but if every once in a while, like something just comes out of nowhere and tells you it's time, to to weave and run through red lights and
Speed.
yeah, go 75 through a 35 zone. Like, I mean, well, I thought I was being safe, but it only takes one of those and you're dead.
That's right.
It's like
Totally.
it's not a matter of only doing it once in a while. It only takes one. That was my experience of like I could have lost it all
Yeah.
if it only went a little further. I was lucky, yet it was still a disaster. And as I said, that's something that rears its ugly head. I mean, in different ways. It's not like the exact
Hmm.
same thing is played out, but yet the same concept plays out where,
Mm.
um, so
How
the
so? How does it? How does that concept play back out?
okay, so the way I like to think of it is, it's easy to make money in the markets. It's easy to make money trading, but it's even easier to lose money.
Mm.
Meaning, we see it all the time with beginners and veterans alike. But there are times where you do make money, and it's just like you're just like, oh, whatever. You just keep hitting winners, and it's just like, oh, that was easy. Like, what a lifestyle. Some days it just feels easy, right?
Yeah.
But it only takes a single moment where you let your guard down and to do something stupid.
Mm.
You don't just give back a little bit. It's just like, oh, okay, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. It's not like you're a baker and you burnt a batch of cookies and you're just like, well, okay, fine. I just have to make the next batch and we'll be okay. I mean, you're a baker and you burnt the house down. The disasters are bigger than the successes.
Yeah.
And, you can make, a new trader can make six figures in their first year and blow it, go down below zero in just a matter of days or a couple weeks. And it happens all the time, and it happens in veterans too. Like the amount of money you lose and how fast is so startling.
Mm.
And it's for me. I think you're asking like, how does this play out? So I've noticed certain patterns that lead to these situations. One is it often follows on the tail of a you know a, a stretch of success,
Mm.
a winning streak or something where the money was coming easy. So of course, yeah, your confidence gets building, and if you have whether it's a day or a whole stretch, where you're making money and it's easy, well, obviously, if it's easy, that means you're not putting much work into it. Well, if you're not putting much work into it, that means a trade is going to come where you're not working very hard at it. So you let your guard down. You
Mm.
don't do the research as thoroughly as you should.
Mm.
And, this is going to vary for different styles of trading. But for me, one of my vulnerabilities for the style of trading, not just because of who I am, but just, the type of trading I do, when the market cycle shifts and it becomes a different trading environment, it kind of just it tends to happen in ways where sometimes you don't quite recognize that it shifted. There's a transition, where it
Yep.
might take you a few days where things aren't as easy, and so you let your guard down. The cycle's kind of shifting. You're not doing your research. So what happens is all of a sudden you have a trade that looks like it was one of these ones that was coming easy.
Mm.
Whether, it might have been yesterday or last week, it's another, oh, here's another one. These are easy, hit the key and, there you go, place your big trade. And guys, I don't know why the hell anyone would work for a living, and then a few hours later, you're staring at this giant loss that keeps growing. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? Well, you know, um, again, the pattern that happens with me is very common is I place the trade when at the moment that the trade is placed, it looks like it's something, meaning like a setup or some type of situation scenario. Like I like to trade this. This looks like a good one. This looks like a good opportunity. I'll take this one, but it looks like something. It looks like label as setup version A when it's actually setup version B. But you don't see it right away until it's too late and you're trading it completely wrong. And of course, it's so easy in hindsight, but in the moment, either I let my guard down and see the signs that were there, or I let my guard down and, sometimes not everything is obvious. And even if I was looking, I might not, maybe the signs weren't very clear that it was not what I thought it was at first.
Yeah.
But by letting my guard down, I'm not responding because, once the information the market is conveying starts to enter my brain to be processed, totally. I might be discarding it because I don't, you get into that moment of like, that's partly the ego too, where it's just like, I'm too good at this. I'm making money. This is easy, and you don't want, the trade's not going well, but it's going to be fine. Because, I maybe even in that winning streak, you had a few trades that started off not well, but ended up working out great. So, I'll take I can take a little heat, it'll work.
How do you guard for that yourself? How do you guard for that not happening? Because you've got to, right? You're telling us that like you still have to. So are there nets you put forward to catch yourself doing that?
Yes. So, I think there are a lot of little things you can implement, to help prevent that. One of the simplest ones for myself is just the knowledge that if I've been making money and it's been coming easy, that's the time to pay attention. Like, the big loss is coming. It's around the corner. All my biggest drawdowns have happened after my most successful periods. And therefore, so it's sort of, but that not only does it take years, or at least for me, it took years of experience to learn that, but not just years of experience, it took a lot of pain, to get that message through. But when I'm in a trade, what I like to do is I'd like to be what I consider like being an observer of myself as a trader, a third-person observer. And I want to be brutally honest with myself. So discard any sense of like the ego. Like the goal here is to make a good trade and to make good decisions. And to be really clear, making a good trade is not defined by making money or losing money. It's by even more than just making a good trade. In each moment of trading, so the trade may have been placed 10 minutes ago or 3 days ago. The point is right now, in this exact moment, so I'm going beyond just make a good trade. Now I have a moment every moment of trading is a moment to make a decision. A lot of times the decision is to do nothing, stay in the trade. But that's a decision. Each moment you have a critical decision to make, which is what is the best possible decision at this moment. You may have made mistakes 10 minutes ago or 3 days ago that got you into this current moment, or you may have made great decisions, but that's all irrelevant. The only thing you can control is this moment. And you have to make, from this point going forward, a decision which will lead to the best possible outcome from this point forward, which might be, taking a loss, but by making a good decision, you could take a smaller loss than you otherwise would, maybe, making back some of the money, but it will still be negative, or getting stupid and making that loss a lot worse. So you have to, so like the outside observer is, how, you have to judge, you have to look at yourself and think, there's so much wishful thinking involved when we, when we're trading. So this is true of so many things, right? But, this is like, you're hoping for a good outcome.
Oh, so powerful. The wishful thinking. It happens. And again, it's not a phrase you hear often. Stop being a wishful thinker.
Yeah.
So much wishful thinking.
So it's like, as an outside observer of yourself. And the phrase I use to myself is like, I need to be brutally honest, which means the only thing that matters is how do I make the best possible decision now, regardless of all the stupid things that led up to this moment, in order to have the best possible outcome going forward. That the answer to that question has nothing to do with what I want, what I feel, what I believe. It only has to do with, the cold hard truth of, and it might be, you are violating your rules. You are, you misinterpreted this one. You know it, but you're holding on because you're in, some form of denial. You don't want to see it.
Totally.
You have all this bias built in, where the ego, is saying like, oh, I'm good, so therefore, most of my trades work out, so this one will work. But that has nothing to do with the truth and reality. That just has to do with what you want, and the truth and reality is external to you. You have all those internal perceptions and things going on inside of you have nothing to do with what's going on your screen. They don't care about you. So therefore, you have to identify what is the best possible thing that can be done in this moment, regardless if it's you or if you were just looking at, some stranger next to you, and that person, if it was not you and you're looking at that person or watching him and, or her, and you're like, I prefer to say him in this case because, I don't think the ladies would act as stupid as some of us men do in these moments. It's like, what imagine, I could just imagine this sometimes, someone saying next to me, like, what the hell are you doing? That's not, it's, yeah, you thought it was a good setup at first, and maybe even, you could make a good argument that it was, but at this point, it is totally not what you thought it was, or, you're being stubborn, or again, going back to the whole point of like, what's the best possible action to take at this moment leading forward? It might be that a lot of your core ideas at that point were correct, but your timing is wrong. And the best possible outcome is to get out now, wait for it to set up into the pristine setup. You might be right, but opening yourself up to that honesty and, just getting rid of the ego of, trying to worry about, being right.
Yeah.
Who cares if you're right? I
But
mean, you do, but no one else does.
No one else does. That's exactly right. You do care, but I guess the inquiry is like, why does that matter so much, do you think, to traders? Why do you think traders do get consumed with being right?
I think part of it comes full circle to our first opening conversation, the label. I think there's a big part of it of like, if I'm a trader I mean, in order to hold on to that label, you you need to make money and be good at it, right? And to take a loss and to admit you're wrong is like it flies in the face of it. It's just hard to hold both of those concepts simultaneously in your mind and not to have a resistance to it, where they're like grinding against each other. So a lot of times it's almost like you'd rather take the gamble that this bad loss can get worse with the hope that it turns out okay in order to just protect that whole that bubble around yourself of, yes, I'm a trader, and for example, I mean, all these other little branches that come off of that same that same creature of being a trader, like you get attached to this idea of like, I'm having a good year. Well, if I take this big loss, I'm having a good year. So, man, if I could push my luck and turn this around, I can hold on to that, right? But the world and the markets and what that stock is doing don't care if you're having a good year, or they're going to do what they're going to do regardless of that concept. Or I've been profitable every day of this month, and if only 3 more days to make it, and I'm gonna well, the market doesn't care. There's so many of these things going on. One other, this is subtle, but to tie into that whole approach, though, one thing I like to do I try to do it all the time because I think it really helps. But especially when you're dealing with we all sometimes challenge with the concept of the amount of money we're playing with. I mean, obviously, if you're new at this, maybe not, but but if you're going to keep doing it, you get to that point where you're placing trades, and sometimes you get these moments of like, oh my God, it's the value of a car, like whatever the concept is, and all of a sudden, like it just shifts how you're thinking about it, because it doesn't help. And to think that you're losing on a trade, it's like, that's a year's salary, that's a car, that's a house, like that's horrible. It's going to screw you up. But to counter that, what I think it's important to, like, I hate throwing numbers around because I know there are people that are like, it could be on both sides of the spectrum. Like some people, the numbers might sound like nothing. To other people, it could be enormous, and they'd be like, but let's just pick a number as an example. Let's say you're down. I mean, you've been having a good year, and now you're red on the year, and you're down $100,000 on like whether it's a single trade, or it depends on the type of trade. Obviously, not everyone's going to have a bet on a single trade where that could even happen.
Right.
So adjust this example based on your style or type of trader you are. But let's just say now you're down $100,000 and you're red on the year. So obviously there's this knee-jerk psychological response, like, it's just going to be true of everybody. Like, it's just this horrible feeling of like, I need to make $100,000, right? I mean, it's hard to shake that. It's
totally.
But what I like to do after something like that, and for bigger numbers, is remind myself, and on a more extreme level, like let's just say, literally just lost several million. Well, and even if that trade, one of those trades, hopefully I don't lose all that one. Hopefully it doesn't happen much, but whatever. Okay. Even if I'm still in it, I still use this thought, which is, if I take an action now that reduces my loss by $1,000, $50,000, $100,000, well, that's $1,000 I wouldn't have had. It's so hard compared to the big number, but yet that doesn't matter. It's over, or you're not going to get it back. If I walk down the sidewalk and I see a $1 bill, unfortunately, due to inflation, I probably would have used the example of a quarter.
totally.
Now that the quarter might be, how dirty is it? I don't know.
So true.
I'm going to bend over and pick it up. Even if I lost $100,000 trading that day, because at least now I am $1 less poor,
That's right.
$1 more rich now than I was a moment ago. And whether you're down by $100,000 and you can take one little action to reduce your loss by $100, it is just as worth it as picking up a $1 bill. In fact, it's 100 times more worth it. And yet, but it's hard to make that adjustment mentally because now it's all about got to make 100,000. Like you cannot, but yet it's irrelevant. You need to make the decision I'm making, even with all that heat in the moment, still comes back to I can just make one decision now that improves this by $1,000, whatever. I mean, hopefully a little more, 5,000, 10, like whatever it is.
Totally.
It is. I need to just completely shed all that crap and just be like,
focus on that.
And okay, so we began the conversation talking about the trader label. Once you've been doing it a while, I guess it just somehow it finds you, and you have super glue on your forehead, and suddenly that label's stuck and you can't get off. Right? So now you have this label, you're a trader.
Yeah.
People call you a trader, you call yourself a trader. Now that label's there, you're a trader. So let's say, well, in the way I would define it, to be a trader, all I do is trade. Well, that introduces immediately introduces the whole idea of, well, maybe we don't really want to be a trader. What we want to be is a professional trader.
That's right.
A professional is someone who makes a living at what they do. If you're a professional musician, you get paid to do it.
That's right.
Anyone can bang a piano.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, call yourself a musician. I don't care. Yeah. But to be a professional, someone else has to actually pay you to do it. So what we really want is the label that says professional trader, right? So if you're a professional trader, you're generalizing, but really what it comes down to is you need to be able to make a living trading.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess arguably you could make a profit trading and if you make enough money doing something else, but just to generalize, you need to be able to make a living trading. So if you took a massive drawdown, horrible trade or trades, and let's just say you blew $250,000 in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
How, of course, your head is totally wrapped up on making back that amount. But come back to the definition of professional trader. Due to inflation, unfortunately, I don't know, depends on where you live. Let's just say $100,000 a year profit.
Yep.
So you just lost $250,000, but yet your goal should not be to make $250,000 back. Your goal should be, averaged out over the next 12 months to make $100,000. And it's just like, but I just lost 250. Irrelevant. If you can make $100,000 from, despite what happened yesterday, from today until the 1-year anniversary of today, your goal is to make $100,000. I mean, adjust according to who you are and your cost of living, and whether or not you lost $2 million. Your goal going forward, if you want to be a professional trader, is not to make $2 million. And it doesn't matter if you made $1 million last year. Your goal going forward. Now, granted, we always have to adjust according to all kinds of different things. But the point is like just in the most basic, simple level, you want to be a professional trader. Your goal does not need to be to make millions, and it does not need to be to make back some terrible loss that you took. It needs to be to make enough money to make a living and to do it consistently and reliably enough so you can pay your bills. Doesn't help if 1 month you're down 50,000 and the next month you're up 60. You're making a profit, but kind of hard to pay the bills with that kind of.
For sure. So powerful. Gregg, that's such a key point.
But this is, we're talking about these things, and it might sound like I'm transitioning into preaching, but this is actually my internal process of what I'm telling myself, especially after a bad loss, is my goal is not if I had a great year last year, my goal is not to make that much money this year. My goal is, and if I just took a bad loss, my goal is not to make the money back. My goal is not, it's hard. We all have egos. It's like we could talk about it all day about how, oh, I'm not like that. But yet, we're all human. It's in there. It's in us, even when we, you know, shove it in a closet and lock the door, it finds its way out.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a great year last year and I just took a huge loss this year, now I'm more deep in the red, this ego thing's kicking in. Like, I don't want to have a losing year. Oh my God. I want to make as much money as I made last year because that, the goal is to, crush it. The goal is to continue to grow. The goal is blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, isn't the goal to make money doing what I want to do and to enjoy it and to do it in a way that's not shortening my lifespan because of all the stress and to have balance and enjoy life, in which case isn't the goal just to make, enough money and, a little more for comfort, but, enough money to make a living doing it so that I can continue to be a professional trader. If that's the goal, then last year's amazing profit, this year's huge drawdown, that's all irrelevant. Doesn't matter. All that matters is going forward. And going forward is not connected to those big numbers that are stuck in your head. And until you shake that, you're just going to keep trying to chase those big numbers and you're going to go, there's that snowball effect. You're trying to make back the big loss. Why not only trying to turn this year from red to green, trying to also, get back to where you last year, you're pushing it more and more and more. And you're just going deeper into that realm of those horrible decisions being fed by the ego and, the foolish, wishful thinking nonsense and on and on and on. And yet if you stop and shove that all aside, like you're standing next to somebody making those decisions and you saw it and you're like, dude, what are you doing? That's a terrible idea. That's a terrible trade. Like, why are you fighting this one? Like, you're obviously the setup's not working and you're still in it, or you're adding more money to something that's not even working. Like, there's so many of these things. Like, you would see it in an instant when someone else is doing it. And yet for yourself, total denial, like blinders on, like you have the ability to see it. You just don't want to because you're so focused on all this other crap.
There's attachment. There's attachment to how you look. Attachment. The other thing too that is how other traders are doing. I see that yet often, especially with our social media world and landscape. I know you are very, not Mr. Always on X. So do you find that makes that challenge even harder for today's traders, that they're always looking at these other traders and what they're doing and comparing themselves to them?
The answer is yes and no, because there are good and bad aspects to it. And therefore, I think there's a healthy way to do it and a not so healthy way. And I think the healthy way is challenging, but it's there. When I started, I had several reference points to look at to kind of guide my impression of both how easy it is to trade and how much money, traders make. It was very vague and, but I had three specific examples that I could draw from that it just created this impression. And then later I would add a fourth to that. It's still early in my career. And the fourth one came from the Jack Schwager books. So early on, I had this impression that trading was easier than it actually is, and that people make more money than they actually do. And
wow.
As I said, I had three reference points from before I started trading. I got started in 1999, which was during the dot-com bubble. So online trading was new, but it was like the hot thing. So, so a lot of people were talking about it. So when I talk about these reference points, like there were lots of people talking about trading, and therefore one of these three reference points I'm talking about, this is an aside, but there was this guy I worked for, the same guy I made all this bets with.
Yeah.
When we were doing a job for this, one of his clients. He was a pretty wealthy guy along the Jersey Shore. And, beautiful house. He was actually right on the bay. I'm trying to remember which town it was. Not that it's highly relevant other than you and me and maybe one person in our audience.
Right.
Hey, I mean, really nice
We could have a
house.
Jersey Enclave audience that watches stuff we don't know about.
All right.
Jersey traders. We're thinking of traders in Jersey.
All right. Let's form the Jersey Traders Club.
Let's do it.
But in our case, you have to be an ex-Jersey resident.
That's right.
So we had this, yeah. I don't know. This is an interesting aside to me, but I don't know if anyone cares. But anyway, this guy, beautiful house in the bay, had the jet skis, the yacht. I even remember the Mercedes, like S12. Which one was it? The sports coupe with the V12 engine. Oh my God! I mean,
sports coupe. Was it a convertible?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So glad. Love that car. That was gorgeous. I remember it.
And this is before, obviously, multiple monitors and stuff were all popular. But he had, the multiple TV screens up with CNBC and all the computer. I mean, everything you can imagine. And as I said, we had, we did work at the client, so we did a lot of home automation and all kinds of stuff, set up cameras and all this stuff. See, I mean, this was stuff that only really rich people did back then. So I mean, our impression of him, he was loaded. And my boss, the one day, had to cancel. They were scheduled to meet and spend the whole day setting up stuff. Now, me and my, I worked with another guy, not the boss, but two of us on the crew, and then the boss would sometimes come out, other times not. But the client was supposed to work with the boss that day, and the boss had to cancel. Now, me and the other crew member, we were there to do some work, but the client took the day off from work in order, this was scheduled, committed.
Yeah.
He had a complete toddler level temper tantrum, and he's screaming. I mean, like classic New York type, mafia levels, just no self-control, a violent level. But he's going like, I make $10,000 a day. You just cost me $10,000. You made me, God. You're going on and on and on. And I'm like, sorry, but that guy was not on the bright side.
Yeah, totally.
He's making $10,000 a day. I guess it's not that hard.
Yeah. Totally. Oh my God. You're like, really?
Well, it turns out years later, he was arrested and he was part of a boiler room scam.
Holy shit.
He was tied to the mafia. He was
oh my God.
So there was a movie which had horrible reviews. What was it called? It was just called Gotti. It's a biopic of John Gotti.
Oh, yeah.
The guy I worked for was friends with John Gotti Jr. So the son of the boss, who I don't know much about him. I think Jr. kind of turned away from, the crime business. So later, after this all happened, he spent several years in prison. But, a lot of the details did come out. So there was boiler room activity, mafia connections, all this crap. He wasn't trading. But I didn't know that. So I thought
that is incredible. It looked like he was trading, though. That's what,
That's what he told us. And why would you doubt him? I mean, totally. He's got all the material possessions.
Still tricked out like a trader.
Yeah.
Wow. That is so fascinating. That it's just so interesting how things we go towards based on these, but it's exposure, right? Thank God, in a sense, that's who you stumbled into.
Yeah, I guess. It's weird, huh? Yeah, I don't know. So let's tie this all the way. Boy, I'm really good at rambling and going on tangents, but tying this all the way back to your question,
We're there.
if we're talking about social media. Okay, so here's how it tied in, and here's my
Please.
point. When I started trading, because I had the wrong idea of how hard it's supposed to be, how much money you're supposed to make, I didn't have the mental ceilings.
Wow.
Because when I started making money, I didn't think I was actually that good. I wasn't impressed because here's this, here's this
Limitless.
New York, you know,
Dumb.
I'm nowhere near his level. Like, God, like, I need to push myself because I'm not doing that good. Like, I'm making money, but God, I have to work hard for it. Like, God, like, how does that guy do it? Like, I have to bust my ass and, I do all this research, all this studying, all this work, all this reading. I spend so many hours and I'm not making $10,000 a day. So the mental ceiling was not there. In fact, it was like the opposite. I was pushing myself because I didn't think it was that impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
of course, I knew compared to the real world, I 100%, to this day, I totally get, we might,
Yeah.
the trading universe can screw with your head sometimes because, the money is so much different than the, quote, real world.
Yep.
No matter how much money you make, you should never forget the value of the dollar,
Right.
quote, real world. Because like,
right. Yeah. But it was limitless in a way, Greg. Like I can really see that benefit of thinking you had that no ceiling, and that would make someone strive to become. It's such a excellent point.
Yeah. And then likewise with like the Market Wizards books, now granted those are supposed to be like, the best of the best, but when I read those pretty early on in my career, I mean, you got guys in there, making easily more than like 100 million. Some of them are billionaires. You know, who am I to think it's so great making like $1 million? Like, and again, I know the real world. I never lost connection to that. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about if you're going to think like, you know, you're just, you're so amazing. Because like you made them. If you ever do, but if you make $1 million trading, like, well, read the Market Wizards. It's nothing. You're pennies to those guys. So so it helps bring it down a notch. Like instead of feeling that sense of like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's more of a sense of like, all right, good job, but you got a ways to go.
I mean, it keeps you humble. And so it's interesting because that example, what I'm seeing is that you have found a way to take that comparing and to call forth that best version of yourself. And yet, often I see traders use comparing to belittle themselves. And I feel that costs them because they always feel like they're not enough compared to them. So it's interesting. It's like you look at things from like, oh, I can improve even more, as opposed to taking it as a hit.
Interesting. I gotta digest that one. I'll come back to you tomorrow on that because I didn't really think about that. But all right,
come back to me on tomorrow. Let's have to set that column now.
Okay, but I mean, it's interesting because I don't know. Sometimes like something's obvious, but yet we don't really think about it until someone points it out, and you're like, well, I guess I knew that was true, but I didn't really think about it before.
Yeah.
So on a similar note, though, and you were talking about limitations earlier.
Yeah.
The first thing that came into my mind, as I'm trying to come up with a good answer, I kept thinking to myself, like, like a psychological based or emotional based thing that I was dealing with. Well, the biggest one I was dealing with, um, from day one, but definitely for many years, was not necessarily limitation. So I didn't use it in my answer, but now it ties into this part of the conversation. Because I kept thinking, like, wow, what was, the biggest problem I had on day one was insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of confidence, lack of just insecurity of, like, can I really do this? Um, and also I knew when I started trading, okay, I was well aware I was getting started at the perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy in hindsight to say, like, it was a bubble, but uh, if you were reading the Wall Street Journal or watching CNBC, people weren't calling it a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't being thrown around. It was being called, like Greenspan kept calling it the new economy, right? So people were buying into the BS, but even though I wasn't sure what to call it, all I knew, and I remember this, I actually thought of it, just in terms of, like, this is not normal. That's pretty much how I identified it.
Wow.
And just, I just knew, like, it won't last forever. Just
Wow.
the way things were working, not
Totally.
the fact, I wasn't calling a top, and that, nothing
Totally.
like that. Just, I know I'm doing well with these, like this setup I was talking about, like when I first started. I knew it was working well, but I also knew it was because of the environment of, it was a hindsight, it was a bubble, but
Yeah.
all this excitement over this newfangled internet thing, and everyone, like, getting their new AOL account, and first thing you do is like, oh, I heard about this, E-Trade and Ameritrade. I go, this sounds like fun, open the account, and this is before they were highly regulated. So,
Right.
you could have $1,000 in day trade. And first thing you do is, log into the message board, and, you see all this exciting conversation about making easy money. So the world was caught up in this, and there's just a sense of, like, yeah, something's not normal here. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to make as much money as I can while this is happening.
Mm.
I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'll keep doing it as long as I can. Once it's over, maybe I go back to the real world, so to speak.
Yeah.
But knowing that was also this deep drive to want to figure out how to survive past
Mm.
the bizarre times,
Yeah.
the insecurity. Like, I didn't, I was not confident in this label of a trader. I knew that, like, God, once the music stops,
Mm.
it's not, this isn't going to last forever. Like,
No, no.
there's this stupid craziness. Like, stocks don't IPO at 20 and close at 300 on the same day. Like, it's not normal. But that was happening. So
Yeah.
so there's this real insecurity of, like, am I actually good at this, or am I lucky? Am I, you know,
Wow.
I mean, I knew I had a good, like, system, a method,
Yep.
right? But
Yep.
but it could have just been a blip in time of success, and then it'd be over and done. And, that's, so there was an insecurity of, like, what's next? Am I actually good enough, or is it just, luck of what's going on? And for that matter, like, this whole concept of, I didn't want to place a bet unless, I had confidence in it. Now, granted, for trading, I'm using this example before, it's almost like
Mm.
a super high probability bet. Obviously, for trading, it's a lot different. But nonetheless, even for trading, like, if you have a 55 or 60% chance of success, on an equal odds risk versus reward, that's actually a pretty good trade. So
Mhm.
odds are different, but it's still the same concept of, like, that's good and that's worth taking. But um, so I might have had this, like, this method or system that was, helping me identify these good trades, but was that me, or is that just,
Mhm.
happenstance that I found something that was working, and that was working in this environment, and that the environment just happened to be what it was at that very point in my life when I wanted to investigate taking a stab at this endeavor. So super insecure about, what's next. I wasn't really calling myself a trader, and I mean, maybe, I might have thrown it around, but I knew deep down, like, I wasn't
Yeah.
ready to say this is what I do for a living permanently. It's more of, like, I'm making good money, and 1998 and 99, I don't know how much is true, but people were acting like, granted, there were some true stories too, but of course, people were acting like they were making a killing, doing nothing but buying the latest, greatest hot stock. Now, there were some people over the years who have been honest with me, when we talk about things like this, and I've heard a few stories like, a guy would say, oh yeah, I was up like $300,000 and, of course I lost it all once it crashed. It's the type of person who would buy a handful of, the hot names, ride them up, and their account size grew. But these stories were circulating while I'm doing this. So there are these stories of people who are doing very little except essentially reading message boards,
right,
and making more money than me.
Right.
So I'm not like, acting like I'm killing. I mean, I'm happy I'm making money, especially relative to the quote real world. Well aware of the fact that, you can bust your ass and not make this kind of money doing just about anything else in life.
Yep.
But it still didn't make it feel special because, God, there are these people that, I didn't have the confidence to just, read through the message boards all day and be like, oh, yeah, this is the next hot one. This,
You mean hubris? You mean hubris? Because it was not confidence; it was hubris. Those people that were reading those message boards.
I know, yeah, but
I understand. But don't you think, in a way, that humility or insecurity, in a sense, served you?
yes, yeah. That is what I'm saying. That's why when I said it, you were asking about limitations. That's when I'm like, it wasn't a limitation. It was actually a huge positive. And I mean, when I first started, I spent, it seems like every waking moment researching and studying and looking to try to improve myself, not because I wasn't making money, but in anticipation of what's next. Constantly looking for things like what kind of strategy will work, regardless if we're in a bull market or a crazy, .com bubble.
Right.
And, it is the constant drive. So, that drive was, I mean, at times intense. Like, I was just so afraid of, I mean, it wasn't like existential as if like I was afraid like I'd be on the street.
Right.
But it was enough. Like I didn't want to let it go, but I wasn't actually scared of what the alternative was. I wasn't scared of it, but I was like, boy, it would be awesome if I could make this work. It was like that kind of thing. It was like just really like, wow, this really is possible. Man, I'd love to make it work because, I don't know how hard it's going to be once all this madness is over.
That's right. So that it's the phrase came to mind. It's like you never sat on your laurels.
Nope.
What about now? 25 years in.
Well, when the confidence comes back, when it starts growing, and when I'm at a better place than I was then. But if I let myself get too comfortable, then I open myself up to those bad trades. Then the ego kind of slowly creeps in, and all of a sudden I start doing stupid things. So it's a little funny because I've honestly had some very kind compliments and sincere ones from people over the years. I've had some people say, "Wow, you really don't have much ego." I'm like, yeah, you don't really realize, because I know if I do, I'm just gonna lose a lot of money. So I don't know. I mean, I hope it's from a good place, but sometimes it's just because I know if I start acting like the big hot shit that it just bites me in the ass every time. So I got to beat that side down no matter what. And I swear, I've had people tell me such flattering comments, and I mean, I have to be gracious, but my mental dialogue is like, please stop. You're just gonna hurt my next week or two is just gonna suffer because like I don't know. No, don't say that. I don't need to hear it.
Please. Brilliant. It's brilliant. So that that awareness of ego, that awareness of wanting to keep it in check, do you think it is from just being here for 25 years, or is it maturity? Is it age? Is it just we mature as we get older, wiser?
Why do you ask such hard questions? I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes with these types of questions, when I sound like I'm just like, in this state of like, having trouble answering, because I tend to spend a lot of time in the gray area and nuance, and therefore, like when you ask a question like that, and some of the other ones, whereas I have these long pauses, it's not black and white. There's so many things. I'm like, oh, if this, but what about that? And oh, but there's a little bit of this. There's so much, And just like your question with the social media, is it good or bad? And just like with this question, well, in some ways, yeah, it could be real. It could, some of the maturity, age, wisdom, just life experience can really help. In other ways, it hurts. In some ways, being young and naive can help because, you tend to be, I don't know, some of those like limitations we're talking about, like some of them kind of creep in over time, right?
Yep.
When we're young, we dream big, it's like there's so many possibilities in this world, and you're still exploring, like, what am I going to achieve in life? I'm talking about like in your early 20s or something, like, and are you going to be the next market wizard? Like, hey, well, it's possible. Like the realm of possibilities, it's infinite, and you don't know yet, because you're just starting.
Yeah.
So it enables you to like to have some of these ambitions and aspirations that are lofty, and I've had some of I still have some of those, but but there's always a sense of like, keep pushing, see where you go. It doesn't mean I believe I'm going to be the great, but it does mean like I want to keep pushing to see how close to that I get, because I don't know. And then, after been doing it for 25 years, like, there comes a point of like, yeah, I don't know if I want to keep, pushing to that level, because like, I have been trying, and like, maybe I should settle for really damn good versus, the best or the greatest. So, so you start to settle, but I don't know.
No, it's true. I think it's beautiful that you say that, because it is going to be different for everyone. It's going to be different based on where you are in your life. And there is no black and white answer to any of these questions. They are just the ones. But what I see repeatedly in just even listening to a Trader for a Cause, like, you walk around the question, you look at the question from different angles, you contemplate all the sides of that mountain, and know that the position you're looking at the mountain from is probably going to look different if you walk just, a few degrees around it. And that is something that feels like it must serve you as a trader. The ability to live in the ambiguity or live in the inquiry. If that, does that resonate? Do you think that does serve you as a trader, this ability to live in the gray?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Some of those same traits get expressed in life. I can get stuck in, the paralysis by analysis, like, God, I can spend way too long struggling to make a decision on something that, costs $100. It's like place trades for, these ridiculous amounts of money, and then you go to the store and you're like, oh my God, do I buy this one or this one? I don't know. But that's some of the same processing, so it can hurt and it can help. And just like everything, there's a balance point. Being too far on either end is not healthy in most things. And in trading, being too quick to to make your decision, to not be accepting the information, and to really be processing it, can obviously not be good, because then you're just going to be way too quick to just be like, oh, I like this one, and jump on it, and just like, you have to filter and really make sure. Because it's in a similar way, like, something like, you're brutally honest with yourself, where you're shedding all those thoughts, beliefs, emotions, desires, wishful thinking, all that crap. Just like when you're processing information, though, it's like, you're hoping that you're coming across something that's good, but you have to kind of pull in some of the devil's advocate type of positions of information, and be like, are you sure? Because there's a chance this or that. Pull it in, play with it, and make sure, like, okay, after you pull it in, yes, I'm still comfortable with it, it's good.
So right there, that point, I want to come back to that question about traders who are, let's say, less than 5 years into this, that certainty. How do they measure? What you just spoke to, like, is a process you go through for yourself. Do they do it the same way to find that certainty? To trust themselves, or to trust their experience or their pattern recognition.
Yeah. So let's tie this into what I was evading earlier with the whole question. Yeah. When I got started, I wanted to find a system, a method, something that was more statistically based, not just message board based. I tested ideas. I looked at charts and tried to come up with, what works. I played with a lot of technical indicators, different things like that. And, the whole idea was like, come up with something that has, a positive expectancy to it, not just something that looks good, feels good, whatever. And so my early career, I was, my goal was to find the holy grail of trading, which is, to find the automated system that just makes bank over and over and over, and all you do is, check in once in a while. They count your money, it's like, that's the dream. And I pursued that, quite intensely. I really spent tons of time, testing strategies. I would test technical indicators, to look for things, see what worked, what didn't work. I would, I did all kinds of stuff like that. And I would spend hours looking at the charts, looking at, going through, just all kinds of stuff. And along with all those things, one of them, just trying to add some, I think of all the things I did of that type, one of them I think is probably the most valuable was, I saw, a stock that in hindsight was a good trade, whether it was, a chart that went up a lot, which would have been a day trade for the day, or, something that, had a multi-day, multi-week run. I would go back, software is a little more limited back then, but, I would essentially do essentially like a replay of sorts, only I'm doing it a little bit less sophisticated. where I'd look at the bars as they played out, and on an intraday basis, like on a 1 minute chart. And I still sometimes do it to this day, scroll the chart back to, the beginning of the day, tick by tick, minute by minute, look at how it plays out. And it's essentially like each bar, is there something there I could have known that would have told me, this was the right time to get in? Is there something that would have told me if I got in here that this, I should have gotten out, before this or that happened, just all kinds of variations of that. And with, all kinds of patterns, chart patterns, as well as indicators, as well as, just you name it, on and on and on. But essentially, that's, in hindsight, it's what we would now call, you better know this term, intentional practice. Yeah, okay. It's been a while since I read the book that talked about that. That's why I was looking. Hope I got that right.
Yep.
So according to that concept, practice doesn't make you better. It's intentional practice, which you know all about. So you can fill everyone in it. I was inadvertently doing that,
Yeah.
I mean, I was in search of things. I mean, it was tied in, it was all relevant, but I was inadvertently building up this mental database and mental practice of trading without trading while searching for, the holy grail. Like, how the hell do you know these ahead of time that it's going to be the good one, the one that you should have bought, or the one you should have avoided? How do you know you should have gotten out right before, it peaked? On and on and on. That was building up this mental database. So how do you know, if you're a newer trader, how do you know these things? How do you find them? You're not going to watch a few videos and learn. You're not going to read a book and learn it. You're not going to, I mean, you can learn, and not to say you shouldn't watch videos or whatever's out there, granted, not too many people read books anymore, but you should read some books. You should read and learn because it can help, it's a shortcut to getting better, but it's not going to get you over the hump. That's not going to make you successful, but will at least speed up your process because, it helps to know concepts and helps see what other people say works and doesn't work. They're not always right. But it also gives you some ideas when someone says, this is the great, amazing setup. Everyone, this is easy. This is what you should do. Okay. And now go and look for it yourself on charts. And rather than, spending 100
Greg,
days.
You're sorry to interrupt you, but your camera just shut off.
I didn't want people to see that part.
Okay, good. Exactly. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
So if someone is out there teaching this amazing new, their amazing method, they're set up that, just wake up, put up your computer, place your trade at the open, 10 minutes later, you make $1,000 and then you go to the beach for the rest of the day or play golf, okay. Most likely there's some BS there, but you can still take an idea like that. And rather than waiting 100 days to find out like, that was a waste of time. Well, you can go pull up charts from the past. Now, granted, you have to be careful. There's going to be some bias there. It's very easy when you think you have something that's going to be profitable. Like assuming you buy stocks long, the shorting would be the opposite. But if you buy stocks long, it's easy to pull up a chart. And it's hard to fool yourself. It went up. So you're now pulling up the one that went up.
Yeah.
To test an idea of what works to buy a stock. And there's kind of some confirmation or, some type of bias going on.
For sure.
Because you're not pulling up the stinkers.
That's
so you have to be cognizant of that. I mean, there's no way to 100% eliminate it, but you have to be aware of like, okay, if it looks like you're finding something that looks easy and, and you look through, historical charts and you're like, I mean, every one I pull up looks like it works. Keep in mind, you're going to pull up the ones that work because they're the ones that are on your, either on the radar or the ones that people are talking about. So they're in your head. It's like, it's easy to say, boy, I wonder, if I would have bought a stock and held it 8 years ago, What would be a good strategy? I bet a really good strategy would be to buy electric vehicle manufacturers that are based in California. Great strategy. Well, of course it works great, because you're picking the one that worked.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to, get the point. If you want to broaden that a little more and be like, okay, I want to pick stocks that 8 years ago seemed like hot stocks. Well, now you have to, maybe find some kind of the Wayback Machine.
That's right.
Go way back 8 years and see what people are talking about and see what would have been on your list in real time.
Yes.
You're still going to have some bias in that, but at least it helps level it a bit. And now you could say, okay, if I were reading articles looking for the next hot thing back then, what would have been on that list? And then look at those charts.
Beautiful. What an excellent exercise that is. What is another, I want to say, somewhat obscure? You don't hear that recommendation often, what you just said. What would you say is another, if not obscure, let's at least say not a common suggestion among the gurus to traders that you wish was said more to traders that are under 5 years?
I thought when we agreed to do this, you had promised that most of the questions would be multiple choice.
I lied.
All right. So so now I have to think of what are the common things and then which are the ones they don't say. Wow.
You're singing for you something today.
Wow. Well, the way you asked it, you said that, I just want to make sure I got it. Did you say the trading gurus or the trading, what did you say?
Yeah. I felt your recommendation just now was somewhat obscure and not common. It is such a genius way for a trader to kind of get to know themselves and learn and see where maybe they have a bias that blinds them from recognizing patterns. So it made me think that is such a unique sort of exercise that I'm curious if you have other exercises that you could give to traders that they don't hear every day from any place, that you think, gosh, wish more people suggested traders try this or try that.
I see. Okay. Hmm. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say, but if you were I don't know if this is a good answer. I mean, this is something I've come across though. So I see it. I'm not sure. I'll let you decide if this answer sucks.
Okay.
But
Deal.
Please be honest.
I will.
All right. I've seen people this may be more applicable to more traditional investing or longer term trading / investing, but I do see this carry over to this regular trading. So what I'm talking about is for an investor, sometimes they research a company and they just try to learn whether or not it's a good or a bad investment. And it's just such a it's I mean, I think that exercise is, I don't want to say complete waste, but it doesn't it's not likely to produce significant results or much advantage. There's so many things it depends on for that kind of answer, but I'm broadly generalizing. All right, so let's say you're an investor and you're I want to put some money to work. I got to find some good investments. So you go through and you spend some time researching, some of the ones that you think the impression are good ones to check out, and then you pick your favorites. Okay, so even if you're successful at that, how much edge are you going to have? Because you picked ones that are
Mm.
pretty, a little bit better than others, pretty good compared to okay. All right, so where I'm leading with this is I see traders doing kind of sort of similar things whereby they might see a stock, and they want to trade it because kind of the same idea. Like this is the one that has a lot of activity, and I like following this one. Whatever, it's Apple,
Yes.
Netflix, Tesla, SPY. Okay, so then they look for setups and then they trade them, and it's just like, okay, so really what you're doing is you're limiting yourself to things that maybe are kind of sort of good compared to not
Mm.
quite that good. And I mean, how much edge is there? But compare that to um, if you want to find really hot opportunities, you need to find the things that are really moving. So
Mm.
how are you? I don't know. Like, how are you going to find much edge? Like, if you do find an edge on a setup, like on one of these big names, like and especially because they take a lot of money to trade, like even if you're right, you're making these little
Yeah.
tiny things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, now compare that to if you looked at the stock that was up 50% yesterday. There's a high chance that stock
Mm.
is going to be up or down 20, 30% today.
Yeah.
Compare that to a stock that's going to be up or down 2%.
Yeah.
Why not go to the one that has all that?
Mm.
So what I'm saying is people go through all these um, I hear all the time, I look at the average true range of Tesla, and when it's over this, I do this. I'm like, well, it's exciting, but just look at which stocks are up the most yesterday, and it's going to blow away the percentage wise the moves you're looking at, and you're fighting. Even if you're really good, you're putting all that effort to make chump change.
That's right.
When you now, granted, of course, the flip side is the type I'm talking about, huge risk.
For
Because
sure.
all I'm saying is if you want to figure out what's going to move tomorrow, the highest correlation of what's going to move tomorrow are the ones that move today.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't tell you which way, but at least now you have stuff that's moving, and now you got big moves that you
Mm-hmm.
could trade off of. Um, so that, and likewise, when I'm talking about I'm talking about this back testing or going through charts, going through these hypotheticals, like what could I have known or could I have seen?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I've done it plenty of times on some of the same stocks. I'm not the big names that don't
Mm-hmm.
move much, but do it on the other ones, like the ones that move 100%. It's like, could I have known anything ahead of time that told
Right.
me this was going to do what it did? Would I have known, that I should have bought it even after it was up 20% on the day, knowing that it was going to go a lot further? I mean, now you're dealing with some real opportunities to,
Yeah.
make a significant chunk of money. And I don't know, it's like when people talk about, it's probably has a lot more to do with the technical based traders, like when they really get in
Mm-hmm.
all these, variations of, um, all the different lines and bars and squiggles on the chart. And they're looking at these usually large cap names or ETFs. It's like, and if you're good at that, you could probably make a lot more on these other ones. And if you're trying to study how to, even if you want to trade those names, when one of those makes a big move, try to reverse engineer what leads to the big move. Because if you spend, um, so let's say a stock like Tesla has, um, for every uh, 5 trading days, there's one day. Doesn't mean one out of, it could be several in a row, but generally speaking, there's one really big volatile day for every 5, kind of just churning, grinding days. You don't want to, so in this case, you don't want to spend 5 times of your, of your effort and energy studying in those those days relative to the amount of time you spend on the big day. You want to spend 5 times the amount of time figuring out that big move, those types of charts. And on those other days, the real research on those, in my opinion, is not like, oh, how can I make money on the day that moved, depending on where the chart's at, $2 or $5.
Right.
No, what you actually want to figure out in those days is, how do I know this is the day to not even touch it?
Totally.
And that shouldn't be as hard to figure out as figuring out what are the good trades. It's, which leads me maybe to a better answer. I hope your editor really wants to have fun with this.
Good.
Because here's the better answer now that I'm thinking about it. I think there is sometimes more, at least just as much, if not more value in knowing what to avoid as what to trade. And we're in such a hyper-focused mode on finding the really good ones that sometimes don't realize what we really want to know is, which are the pitches we don't want to swing at.
Yeah.
And, we blow so much money on the stupid trades, the time wasters, which also leads back to, this is one of my pet peeves of the whole trader label. And don't take that too literally. I don't hate the label, but one of the problems using the label leads to is, if you wake up in the morning and boot up your computer and you're all ready to go, if you have this label, I am a trader, it leads you into this mentality of, because I am a trader, I have to trade. Well, if you're not making money, you shouldn't be trading. And if today's not a good day to be trading, you're only hurting yourself. Depending on your style, the answers may vary, but myself, a lot of people I know make the bulk of their money on just a small chunk of the days on the calendar. And the rest of the time, if you're good, you make a little bit. And if you're not good, you give it all back. So your success often has less to do with how well you're doing on the good days and more to do with what you're doing on the bad days. And the bad days being simply defined as days when there's just not much happening. If you can, I just making these connecting dots. All right, so when I would go through some of my research, there are lots of things I've done, but the one I was talking about, like where I would scroll through charts, spend hours doing that. And one of the benefits, besides just the fact that it would help me learn, I mean, on the one hand, it's frustrating. I spent tons of hours, and it felt like I was going nowhere, but what it was really doing is building up this mental database. I really got good at seeing charts and seeing patterns and all this crap. But a little side benefit was it kept me busy.
Wow.
Trading days going on, and I'm not trading.
That's right.
Not much going on, but yet I am hyper focused on this activity.
Absolutely.
So when you're having so when you enter the day that, thinking you're a trader and there's not much going on, you have this sense of like, well, you have to be trading if you're a trader.
Right.
Well, you can shift that and think, one of my tasks I'm supposed to do as a trader is research. And one of the types of research I'm supposed to do is researching patterns and learning about indicators and back testing and exploring ideas and setups. And all of that will take you away from the buy and sell button when there's not much going on. So that could help a lot.
Such important perspective, and it's almost, I never hear it. That's
good. Thank you.
Excellent answer. All right, we're going to wrap it up, even though I would be happy to stay here for 2 more hours. And what I would love to have you share, which in a little bit you did share already, but I'm going to ask it again, specifically, what drives you to keep showing up every day now? Is it the challenge, the freedom, or something else?
What drives me to trade, what inspires me, what motivates me, all those.
Yeah.
A couple things come to mind real quick. There are probably more. So if you give me enough time, I'll come up with more. But I'll spit them out. Ready?
Okay.
So right now I'm working with 2 other guys on my team. At this point, we have a real good relationship. So it feels it's no longer just me investing and or having them trade my money. It's not like a prop firm arrangement. Like it's shifted more. I don't want to overstate it, towards like mentorship, collaboration. I'm no longer driven as much by me. How much can I make? Just trade. You know, I'm I find some of the motivation to be simply involved, um, in whether it's helping them or just enjoying having some collaboration. It adds a new level. That It's not like I finally discovered some big missing piece of what I was always craving. It's definitely not what I would have needed, wanted, cared for. It's just what's appropriate at this point. I'm not driven by make as much money as possible and push myself to the highest level ever. You know, but then the other answer, the other half, the other part I was thinking about was I have tried to step back a bit from trading, and I have taken time off, kind of dabbled with some forms of like semi-retirement, whatever. When I come back to trading, which I have been doing a lot more, just very recently, been really doing it every day. I'm alive, awake, connected, to the, I almost feel like it's overused at this point. People talk about, the flow state, but just,
Yeah.
it's more alive. Like, there's an energy that I don't know how to describe, but we're recording this on a Saturday. Sorry if I ruined that for everyone. Release it on another day and you lie to them and tell them it's live.
No, I don't.
Okay. But this is an example. I on a Saturday, wake up and it's like, exhausted. And it's like, what do I have to do today? I mean, this is like dragging through the, the bullshit side of life. I don't want to overstate it, but like on a day when it's just like, oh, I got chores to do. Oh, I got this crap to do. Oh, I forgot to take care of this. It's like figuratively, I am, pushing myself from behind, like, come on, just get through it. You can do trading. It's like, it's weird, but it's like I could show up to the trading day. And it's like, I might not necessarily be excited, happy, or, just, there's no like, oh my God, I love this. But once it starts going, I'm like just a different place, and a different place, like with that inner energy, which is hard to describe, but like, again, that when that the flow state, I actually read the book by
Csikszentmihalyi.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Awesome name.
So good.
Got that one
down. Got that one down.
When I heard how to say his name, I replayed it like 10 times. I'm like, God, that's how you say it? All right.
Totally.
I remember I read the book shortly after it came out. I just, I got lucky. Somehow it was recommended by, I don't know, but that's how we learn about books. But, before that caught on, as everyone now talks about flow state. And, I understood the concept, I was talking about, like, it made perfect sense, but it's like more than ever today is like, I identify with it, but yet now that, I don't know if you agree, I just hate the way it just feels like it gets cheapened when it's overused,
I get that. But it's too bad because it is an inexplicable feeling that word does capture. It is.
And that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, more than ever, I've realized that's what's happening. Even though I was aware of it for a long time, like, it is, and perhaps it is happening at a deeper level than I ever used to. Because just like, all the various concepts he talks about, like how, hours fly by.
Yep.
Like, I mean, again, not to bore everyone with my Saturdays, but like, I wake up and I'm like, I better eat some breakfast. I don't have any energy. I'm like, oh, I'm hungry. It's like that, right? Trading, it's like, forgot to eat breakfast. Oh my God, it's 1:30. Like, it doesn't even occur to me, I'm like, I mean, I literally have days, not good. I mean, I actually don't want to do this, but I literally have days where I sit down and don't get up once. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, it's so bad for the legs and, the circulation and like, and never mind, I never got up for food or water. But it's not because it's good or bad. It's because I didn't even notice it, that's how. So it's weird because even though it's such a positive, it's like, it's not like a deep drive where, I'm like, oh, I can't wait till Monday to get that again. But once it's on, it's really on.
Yeah.
I don't know. People, you might want to edit this out because it does, probably wouldn't be very good for traders to hear. But um, people make an immediate assumption that, if you're really good at something, it must be like you're, the most passionate thing in the world for you. Like it's like, and, I've had people just like come up to me like, oh, tell me about your, it must be your passion. I'm always like, is it? I don't know. I mean, which is weird because you'd expect me to jump all over it. It's like, is it a passion? I don't know. Because I mean, when I started, the truth is there are parts about it that are a passion, but it is a job. There are aspects of it that are not always enjoyable. There are aspects that are just mundane. I could take it or leave it. So it's not. I don't know. I mean, so I think just to say generalizing trading is that your passion, or to say if you're going to be a successful trader, you need to make it your passion. I don't know if I agree with that.
Love that because I think there's a lot of younger ones who think that if it isn't, then they shouldn't stay, and that concerns me because I think no, you actually might be more neutral. And that might actually help you if you don't feel like it's just all consuming.
Good point. Very interesting. So,
but it's fascinating that your flow state is happening even in this description you just gave us of how it can still feel, like it's a job. And there's times when it's not that pleasurable. It's just, it's so great to just hear that those things can all happen at the same time.
I think, man, it's hard. Yeah, it's hard for me to. I would like to kind of know if this is true, but I'm assuming it's. I think it's probably true, which is that if you interviewed and had the honest answers from, professional athletes, high level, champion level, all pros, or, high level professional musicians or artists, actors, whatever. I think if you really got them, past that point of, just trying to, act all gung ho about what they're doing and how awesome it is, you would probably peel back the layers where it probably would have similar things where it's like, talk to Tom Brady about how awesome, but I don't know, maybe he's the wrong example because he might be a little screwed up in the head, but, no, sorry, Tom, if you're listening, I don't mean it in the bad way. I mean as in maybe you're the wrong, maybe you're the exception. Because some people are like so over the top, like I don't know, but but let's just say a super high level athlete, like I don't know, like do they really like? Is it their passion to wake up super early and only eat super healthy and to watch everything they eat, make sure they're sleeping right, and to work out like crazy and to go to practice and to sacrifice all these things in their life?
Yeah,
I think in that case, the better way to think about it is not that it's their passion, it's that they're driven by some type of goal, a vision. That's different. That's not a passion, really, is it? And that might be a better way to look at that. I would look at it. In the beginning, it was, more longer term goals, to succeed, to be able to do it, to earn that professional trader label. Later, I was able to take in a similar way. If, like, obviously lately the markets have been pretty wacky, and what comes out in me, it's sort of like that. It's like a reflex. Like I'm not even running through, but similar to the betting story. It's like I know there are those really good bets there, and it's like I want to find them. Like I'm driven by that, like a challenge, and is that a passion though? I don't know. Like I don't view that as like a passion for trading.
Right. Maybe it's a passion for puzzle solving.
It's also a passion for, well, okay. Boy, I'm going to really ramble when you probably want to get off for dinner, especially because the restaurants close early there.
Exactly.
The new diet plan, get me on a podcast. I'll get talking so you can't eat.
The Gregg diet.
But in all seriousness, and I've used this when I've talked to other people about, like to draw out an analogy. I have a group of friends I meet with, and we have this like monthly meetup where we do these board games, and
Nice.
kind of more they're a little more intellectual strategy things, but but we all tend to be pretty competitive. There's a bit of an intensity there. It's not party games.
Totally.
And I know I mean I recognize it instantly. It's the exact same feeling as trading, like when I'm in that moment, like it comes out, like super motivated, animated, with that sense of like winning, or at least doing as best as I can, whatever.
Totally.
And perhaps one thing which I think I'm fortunate about, I got plenty of psychological, I mean, when it comes to trading psychology, I have plenty of things I deal with. But one of the ones where I think I'm good at, like in this example, like with the games, as intense as I get, competitive and stuff, as soon as it's over, I'm not one of those people that's like mad and upset if I lost. Let it go instantly. Like, hey, that was fun. The fun part was the competitiveness, which is so occasionally we're playing with people who are not competitive. Like, oh, can't do you have to take us so seriously? You really let's just have fun. Like, the fun part is the competitiveness. It's because they think you're one of those people that's going to be all upset if you lose. Like, not that right. Is it really important? No, actually, it's not. But yet, in the moment, I'm like, same thing with trading. In the moment, like I am it just draws like that's the flow state. But when it's over, or if it's out of sight, out of mind, like whether it's a weekend or if I'm on a vacation, I don't know. Does that make it a passion? I'm not thinking about it. Like,
Right.
you could sit here right now and be like, oh, what did you trade this week? I'm like, oh, good question. Because I wasn't thinking about it all day.
Right.
And I
Right.
don't mean to say I don't spend time,
Mm-hmm.
non-trading hours doing work, but I go to do the work. It's not like I can't stop thinking about it.
Totally.
I stop thinking about it. It's over. Now, on a bad trading day, I don't stop thinking about it. I'm kicking myself all night to
Yeah.
give myself the proper self-punishment, which we all deserve.
But this whole conversation, and if everybody didn't listen to Gregg's X Space with me, which was also filled with gems you don't hear. You just don't hear. Everything you spoke to today, Gregg, was a uncommon perspective. And that, to me, is the magic of all the wisdom you drop. You drop things that nobody else is really talking about. And you look with this ability to have multiple perspectives at the same time and just turn something upside down and make it more apparent. It's, I think of that little test they give us, like, is it two people kissing or is it a vase? It's like you're able to see that one that most of us don't see. And for traders, they're just lucky that you're still here talking about these perspectives because they need them. They need these multiple perspectives. And you are dropping them every time they get to listen to you.
Damn. Thanks.
Thank you.
I
Thank
did
you.
not realize I paid you enough to say that. I really appreciate it.
I'm a cheap date.
Damn. Thank you, Kim.
You are really special. You're also an excellent karaoke singer. I just had to get that in there. And thank you for coming, not only on this podcast, but on that X Space, which has now, as of today, I think it has over 2,600 listens, just for the record.
Wow.
2,600.
Girlfriend said she only listened 400 times. So that's actually really good.
Don't think so. But nice, subtle try to exit out. But that is how much wisdom you dropped in that conversation, how many questions you answered. So just for our listeners, if you guys haven't heard that X Space, that is part one of this 2-part conversation with Gregg that we just unfortunately didn't get a chance to record till today. But I'm sort of glad that we had such a good lull because we couldn't have had this 4-hour-plus conversation. If not, thank you for coming on my podcast. Thank you for being such a contribution to this community. And thank you for having such a great sense of humor.
Thank you, Kim. I hope to see you in person at the next Traders for Cause conference and hopefully sooner.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you, brother. I'm with you, brother. All right. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for coming to the Wall Street Coach podcast.
You bet. All right.
I hope you have subscribed to the Wall Street Coach podcast. And if you haven't, it's time to do so. See you on the next podcast.